Hello and welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. They often say that when it comes to the current generations, the biggest job that they are then entrusted with is actually understanding and learning from the mistakes of the previous generation. Now, the question is, to what extent have we as a Pakistani society been able to do just that? And this is something upon which we'll be shedding light today. We'll be talking about intergenerational dialogue, we'll be talking about intergenerational exchange, that too between different generations, and in this regard, that how does this in turn actually impact not only the society but also the societal fabric. In this regard, we'll also be shedding light upon the fact that when it comes to technology, when it comes to social media, how do we see it redefining the contours of intergenerational communication, either for the better or for the worse. In this regard, we'll also be shedding light upon the fact that when it comes to not one, rather various very pressing social issues, be it that of overpopulation, be it that of marriage ideals, be it that of beauty ideals, how do we see the perspectives of different people belonging to different generations changing with regards to all these issues over a period of time. Last but not the least, we'll also be talking about the very pressing need for us to work together with various generations so as to ensure that there's not only a more empathetic but there is definitely a more respectful environment where we all belonging to different stratas, where we all belonging to different generations move towards a more connected world. All of this today, that too with an extremely pertinent panel. Let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for today's show is Ms. Naila Daud. She's a homemaker and she's also a content writer. Assalamu alaikum, madam, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Alongside her, I have On Kazmi, who is a youth activist. Assalamu alaikum ji, and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. And my third panelist for today's show is Ms. Amna Ijaz. She's an educator and she's also a social analyst. Assalamu alaikum ji, and welcome to the show.
Assalam. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Now, before we start the discussion on today's topic, let's have a look at this brief report.
Across cultures and generations, a troubling trend is emerging, a decline in meaningful intergenerational exchange between children and their elders. This disconnect, fueled by various factors like technology, societal shifts, and changing family dynamics, have had significant negative consequences impacting individuals, families, and communities. Some of the many negative effects has been the erosion of cultural values and lack of transfer of knowledge and wisdom. Elders and parents are repositories of lived experiences and historical contexts, often possess unique insights and perspective that younger generations can benefit from. Traditions, values, and customs that have been passed down through generations are at risk of being forgotten or diluted without meaningful interactions between children and their elders. Erosion of cultural continuity can result in a sense of disconnection and rootlessness among younger generations. The lack of intergenerational exchange can hinder societal progress and innovation. Each generation possesses unique insights and experiences that, when shared collaboratively, can fuel creativity and drive positive change. Encouraging intergenerational activities like elders and youngsters volunteering together, sharing family stories, engaging in open communication, fostering intergenerational programs in schools, community centers, and on TV can help create meaningful connections and break down barriers. It is imperative to prioritize and actively cultivate meaningful interactions between generations to ensure a more harmonious and resilient society.
Welcome back. We just saw this report. Now, to get the conversation started with you, madam, when we do talk about the way we see a Pakistani society evolving, more so vis-a-vis the intergenerational changes that we do observe, being the most senior on the panel today, how do you see the institution of family? How do you see our respect for our elders? How do you see the joint family system evolving over a period of time?
Well, evolution is a very natural phenomenon. But from the generation that I come from to this generation, I see a growing distance. My personal experience is that this distance can be made less if all the generations, all the people concerned in living in a unit, they put one step forward.
Right. It has to be a collective effort. But the question then is, going back to the basics, madam, that why is this distance there in the first place? Is it because of use of technology? Is it because of our ever-changing societal shifts? Is it because of the way we do see not one, rather various socio-cultural norms evolving?
See, a lot of these things count in making this distance. Things like economic conditions, because we are living now in a global world, which was not my world. There's a difference. Things like education, the freedom of choice and freedom of expression, which have all evolved. I'm not saying good or bad. So these are things that have made a generation gap.
They have widened the generation gap.
Yes.
But talking from your own personal experiences, because I do understand the fact that you've been living in a joint family system for the longest time ever. So how do you see this entire concept of joint family system evolving over a period of time? Because we do understand that there was this time where at one point in time it was considered to be the cornerstone of the Pakistani society. But the way that we do see it evolving now is that it might not be that viable for many young people who might perhaps choose to be more financially independent, or for that matter have a greater say in the decision making. So how do you see this concept changing over time?
Till 2 years back, in my house there were 4 generations living together. Now we were all very comfortable with each other because we all had our own spaces. It's not a very big house, there are 2 floors, but we had our own spaces. We gave space to each other. We allowed for differences of opinion, but we managed to survive because everybody had their own times. They still do. So it's a matter of giving space to everybody. It's a matter of realizing that what my children, our grandchildren are living through today is not the time that I lived through. See, so it's just a question of I'm not saying whether a joint family system should be continued. It goes separately for everybody.
It goes both ways.
It goes both ways. But for me, it has been a very comfortable situation now that my grandchildren are there, with whom I communicate more than with my own children. There's such a rapport. I mean, they're not hanging around us all the time. Neither am I hovering over them.
Right.
But there is a connection for a very simple thing, like my granddaughter who's 10 years old, he comes every morning before going to school. We make a tiny prayer together.
That's right, madam. But coming towards you on, I would want you to comment on this further, because I do understand the fact that you might beg to differ from madam, being the youngest on the panel today. So how do you consider this concept of joint family system? Because we do understand that not one, rather quite a few young people might not be too happy with it because living with their joint family. So how do you feel, in a way, hold on to our family values, but do it in a manner in which, of course, the respective privacy, the respective dignity, or that right of authority that one has over one's own life, that is something which is not undermined?
With the terms of joint family, when you're young, it's very fun because you have your cousins and everybody around you. So you have people to socialize with. But as you're growing up, you're discovering yourself, you look for that independence. And a joint family is not very conducive to that. Not only do you have to, maneuver around your parents' rules, but also those of your uncles, aunts,
grandparents too.
Exactly. So this is why, I think more young people opt for even going to universities out of city because they want to escape that joint family system.
But another very glaring issue on which I would want you to comment, that the varying concepts, the varying issues that we do see in the different generations as they do stand in Pakistan today, is that of health. We do understand the fact that the definition of well-being, of one's own mental health, one's physical health, have perhaps evolved over a period of time. Now, comparatively, young people are more geared towards focusing more on self-care, on self-love. So what reasons would you attribute to the same? Because this is not something that we do see our parents doing, for that matter.
With young people, I think they have started prioritizing self-care and mental health. I think it's very important that we've started doing that. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure, academic, financial, just being a young person. So there has been a shift. That's not necessarily the case with our elders. I think it was more taboo and stigmatized. Even seeking therapy was looked down upon. With young people, that's not the case, and rightfully so, because we're working on improving our mental health and being the best version of ourselves.
But in addition to that, do you not feel here that the role of technology is something which can be held responsible for pushing people, rather young people, to have these very open and honest conversations about mental health? That too something which we didn't see happening perhaps in the time of our grandparents or parents.
I agree. I think social media has helped a lot. When you hear other people talk about their experiences, you learn from them, and then you feel that you're not alone in experience that. And whether it's depression or whether it's anxiety, it could be anything. And so social media has helped in that way. And I think elder people, they should really take some steps forward and be more open to talking to younger people about their mental health.
Right. But how do you feel can we then have these very open conversations when it comes to destigmatizing mental health per se? You are an art educator yourself, and I also understand the fact that you have been giving all these art therapy sessions. So how do you propose can therapy or art therapy more particularly be used so as to do away with the stigma? Because something which On very rightly so mentioned, it is still there, at least to the extent of our parents, to the extent of our grandparents too.
I totally agree, and I also want to add in that not just the grandparents and the family pressure, but even the social peer pressure for kids is still prevalent in our social circles. Art therapy, on the other hand, is, in my opinion, the way forward, especially for kids, young kids and teenagers, because art therapy gives that platform where they're not stigmatized as the handicapped one or the one who cannot be themselves. Art therapy helps kids, young kids, teenagers,
Even elderly persons.
even elderly for that matter, if they opt for it, to identify and regulate their emotions and to understand without that hospital clinical setting.
And also, you would agree with me when I say this would help you in fostering greater self-awareness that way too. And this
I
is something
totally
which
agree.
perhaps the elderly population in Pakistan definitely needs.
Elderly, sadly, the childhood traumas start appearing after the age of 25. That's why art therapy is even more important. So that instead of everybody going through childhood traumas and realizing them in a later stage in their life, they need to be able to manage, regulate, understand themselves far better and in a safe environment so that they flourish in their
Respective
younger
lives. It's a
lives.
stress reliever, if you may
It
put it,
is,
and
it
also
is.
by what you're saying, then it's also preventive measure
It's a
for
tool.
you. It's a
Yes,
tool
it's a
for
tool.
you not to fall prey to actually
Yes.
intergenerational trauma. Madam, coming towards you, I would want you to comment on this further, but from the viewpoint of the issues and the work that you've had. You've been working on family planning. You've also been working on reproductive health. Now, we do understand the fact that over a period of time, these are issues which might be perceived very differently across the different generations. But then the question is that how can we then promote more open dialogue on the same? Because again, overpopulation is a very imminent issue that the country is faced with.
With my generation, the problem is that we were not so outspoken on these subjects. So when my children or grandchildren come and sit in the room and talk about these things, I do have inhibitions, but I let them talk about these things because I know they are living in a different world from mine, and it's like watching them from behind a curtain, doing their own things, but I am very much there. So I respect their views because I know I can't hold them back, and this is the right of everybody in this coming generation, that they should get the respect of for their views, and it's up to us, the older generation, to allow them this respect. We can very easily withhold it.
But do you not feel here, madam, that when we do talk about the role of media, more particularly the role of Pakistani dramas, we generally do see a more diverse and a more inclusive portrayal of characters, that to family characters. There was this time where we typically saw the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law relationship to be construed to be not the ideal relationship. But then overall, we have seen not one, rather quite a few dramas being made which are very accommodating that way, like they do project this very relationship in a positive manner too. So how do you feel can media, more particularly Pakistani dramas, form that base for generating intergenerational dialogue?
There's a lot of good in them, provided that the people who are watching them are looking at them not for just the entertainment value, they're also taking back something with them. Now look at the recent dramas that are on TV that I am watching. I am not a very avid drama fan, but I am watching a marked progression towards more gender parity. There are fathers now who are taking the sides of their daughters in issues like the choice of marriage.
Right.
This is
Or
a
even
very-
walking out of an abusive relationship.
Yes, even walking out of an abusive, no parent would encourage a child to walk out of a relationship. But if it is abusive, then there's no point in stepping back.
Right.
But again, the decision is the affected person's.
Right.
They should be, by the time they get married, they should have had that, they should have been given that training to be able to see where the line has to be drawn for self-respect.
Right. Right, madam. On which I'll come to you on here, we must talk about this growing usage of people resorting to using filters or Photoshop when it comes to putting their best foot forward. Now, we do understand the fact that this is something which is very common amongst the young people, but what about the elderly population? Do you feel that this is something which equally impacts them too? Because at the end of the day, this is something which in the long term would very visibly impacts anybody's self-esteem and their mental health.
I mean, I completely agree. Instagram and Snapchat, they haven't been great for your self-esteem because a lot of young people do end up using filters, not just on pictures, but also on videos. And now you have, AI filters which are very hyper-realistic, and you can't tell that any modification has been made.
So basically that puts you in another loophole at the end of the day. There could be very easily a deep fake. But do you feel that this is something which is perhaps prevalent in people who might be older than you, people perhaps who might be Amina's age, the middle age group?
I think it's more of the younger lot that's using it. Also, they want to put their best version across. They want to put their best picture, best video. So this is why they use filters. Now, this is why I rely on filters sometimes too. I'll be honest about it. But I think the point being is also we should, as young people, work on ourselves genuinely in reality.
Right. How would you comment on that, Amna? Because a lot of times we see the way you look, that perhaps might even end up influencing the partner preferences you have, the kind of marriage prospects that you have. And this again is something which we have seen changing over a period of time. There was this time in our society where we had this very stark obsession in having fair skin, or for that matter having colored eyes, so as to be able to get the best proposals. But do you feel that as a society we have been able to move past that? Because slowly and steadily that our definitions of beauty, they are evolving generation to generation.
Fatma, I've sadly fallen prey to this whole notion in my lifetime, and I certainly believe that we've moved quite a lot through the generations in the fair skin and the perfect daughter-in-law and the perfect eyes and everything, but sadly we still look for those little fragments in our relationships.
Right.
Even though majority, I think and believe that have developed that perception of a new attractiveness, not just the physical self that is full of filters rather, but unfortunately, that's not a big chunk of our society.
That's a very small part of the
Small
Pakistani
part,
society.
yes.
But moving on, do you feel this is a pressure which is equally levied or expected of men? So when it comes to our changing definitions of beauty, how do you see them evolving over a period of time, generation to generation, especially with regards to men?
I think with the older generations, all of the brunt was faced by women that to meet these unrealistic beauty standards. Interestingly enough, in modern world, men have to face these standards too. So it's not being fair or being tall, but also working out.
No, but with men, the definitions then change. They have to have a particular physique, like
yeah,
they
you
have to be
a gym fit, you
muscular,
have to be
they have to
muscular.
appear masculine.
You have to be tall enough, which is something you don't control. So these ideals which were only for women before are now in this age did on men and women.
Right. So then it's a fair game by that yardstick. But when we talk about the fashion choices, you see, this is again a very interesting development that we have seen evolving over a period of time. When it comes to sustainable fashion, when it comes to opting for more eco-friendly choices, so to speak, we have seen that the Gen Z particularly is very conscious about that. Do you feel again this is something which is equally popular in the elderly population, be it amongst the middle-aged group or even people like Madam who are of course more senior that way?
So from my little experience in the fashion industry, I'll talk about these 3 different age groups.
Please do.
Being a middle-aged woman, I think it's diverse. It's a lot of new things being adapted and a lot of the old things being let go and revived. Talking about ma'am's generation, they had certain standards. They were the brand conscious. The youngsters like on the other hand, are open to anything and everything and more towards sustainability. They're more mindful of their carbon footprints. They're more mindful
Of
of
the
what their
choices that they
culture
make,
is
right.
and how to represent it. So I think Gen Z is doing a better job.
Coming towards, intergenerational communication, another question that I would want to put to you would be about the ever-evolving role of social media and technology. Now, we do understand the fact that, yes, technology has connected all of us, but then again, we do have differing narratives on the same. Young people are often seen complaining that perhaps the elderly population is not very open to using technology. So, as elderly person yourself, how do you propose can we strike that balance between using technology for the greater good, but at the same time, not losing out on our real life human relationships?
You see, I would never say that technology is bad. Technology is good, and it is the day of technology. I can't tell these children to stop using their cell phones, but I can at least provide an environment in the house. For example, evening tea time, where there is a time when we talk about, we have conversations about politics, about economics, about family problems, or even about the schedule for the next day's car commute. So many people going out of the house and all. So I have to balance this by providing that time space, so that they are not forced to go off the cell phones, but they become a part of the conversation. So I mean, they have every right to use the cell phone.
Right, madam. On which I would want you to comment further on, because when we do talk about it from the viewpoint of young people, you perhaps might beg to differ from madam. So when we do talk about the greater use of technology, we all understand the fact that yes, it has connected everybody. But then we also see a lot of times the elderly people running after children so as to stop them from obsessing with their mobile phones, with the gadgets that they do have, that too on special occasions like Eid, anniversaries, even birthdays for that matter. So how do you feel as a young person in Pakistan, can we strike that balance where we do use all these social media apps so as to better connect with others, but at the same time do it in a way which doesn't harm our real life relationships?
Well, firstly, I think it's very true. There are many instances in my own house where everybody's on their phone. But I think young people get criticized wrongly. I think the middle generation parents are on their phones also all the time, whether it's on WhatsApp or YouTube. So it goes both ways now.
At least in your household.
At least in my household. I think a lot of parents do. With the grandparents, it's not as much common. But with the grandparents and parents, especially when it comes to, special occasions, the phones help us, keep these memories.
Right. Yeah. But here again, we also need to consider this vis-a-vis, of course, the equation of grandparents too, because a lot of times people do live in joint family systems, like madam does as well. So moving on, when we do talk about the role of technology, we also understand the fact that it has completely changed the way we work as well. Now, people like yourself have more options so as to work remotely, so as to follow more non-traditional career paths, so to speak. But overall, how do you feel has it then in turn impacted the intergenerational exchange, because this perhaps might be something which people like madam might not be able to relate to?
I think with career-wise, a lot of young people still go on the conventional roads. So we still go for medicine, engineering, doctor. But on the side, on their hobbies, they started doing freelance work. And that's the case with me also. And I think it's very beneficial. A, it's very convenient. flexible, so you can do it while you're studying. Also, a lot of my friends use these apps and you can earn in dollars. So it's very convenient and it's financially beneficial.
But what about those people who are fully focused on adopting all these non-traditional career paths, that too as a full-time option? We do see people becoming full-time, perhaps entrepreneurs, perhaps freelancers. So how would you explain this in the context of the intergenerational exchange?
I think you have to understand why are young people going towards that route. And the reason is because again, it's more convenient, more flexible, but also it pays them more. What you're going to get at 9 to 5 job is not what you're going to make, online when you're earning in dollars. So this is why there's an allure to it, which is why so many young people opt, full-time work, freelance, or full-time do, these gigs. I think it's very beneficial because you have these young people improving their skills, improving their technicality and specialty. And then you also have this money coming into the country. So there's economic growth. And 64% of Pakistan's population is under the age of 30. So we're already online. We're spending our times on mobiles, on laptops.
On which I would want you to add further, Amna. When we do talk about this, we also must appreciate the fact these kind of arrangements inevitably end up blurring that line between one's professional as well as personal life. For example, in the case of vloggers or even bloggers, we see that more often than not, they talk about their personal experiences. So how do you propose can we actually work to ensure that that line in itself that is kept intact?
This is the sole reason why the brand new job description of a content creator has been developed to define that line that is being blurred in personal and professional life. Also, the fact that social media has provided everybody with the platform to make their own noise and to be seen, to be heard, which is why it is even more important for the generations viewing to be mindful of what content do they need to see, do they need to hear to develop themselves further. Blogs, blogging, all of this, personal content to some extent is advisable, but then again, there needs to be some kind of policies or
regulations regarding it, right? When we do see so much content online, we also understand the fact that this might end up confusing the consumer, because they have so much content that they are actually spoiled for choice. But when we do talk about this from the viewpoint of an educator, how do you propose can we overcome those various generational differences vis-a-vis the teaching methods that we have? Because as a teacher, I'm sure you come across people who might not be belonging to the same generation, especially if you're teaching at a postgrad level, because a lot of times we see that people in their 40s, in their 50s, they end up rolling for all these PhD and master classes too. So do you not feel here then the responsibility shifts on the respective educator, the teacher in themselves, so as to ensure that yes, the teaching methods that they do employ, they are in themselves very flexible and they are very apt for all age groups?
Absolutely. And this is why, as an educator, as a teacher, even as a student for that matter, it is important to direct that technological use, the content that needs to be viewed to the student. For example, as an art teacher, I need to know the platforms, the communities, the podcasts towards that certain goal, to that certain ideology, rather than just handing over all those.
So basically all these intergenerational changes, they do end up impacting educators, the education system per se too. Madam, I would want you to comment, but from the viewpoint of being the most senior on the panel today, how do you over a period of time see our notions about intergenerational exchange, about intergenerational communication evolving over a period of time? So how do you feel can we strive towards more healthy, more open, more honest dialogue on this very topic?
Actually, I feel a line has to be drawn between the public and the private. What I am seeing is that with these vloggers and new techno, I don't even know the names, they are erasing the line between the public and the private. There is so
They're
much.
blurring that line.
They're blurring, almost erasing, I think. That line has to be kept intact. Because otherwise, you see, when we start making our own standards, then there is no standard. There is no stopping. You can't be stopped anywhere then. So I find that from my point of view, I think we have to have a dialogue with these youngsters of what is public and what is private, what can go public and what has to remain private.
And what do you propose is the most safe, the most viable, rather the most effective mechanism to do so? Do you feel that this is a responsibility which goes back to the educational institutions, or do you feel that this is a responsibility which then also media needs to undertake?
All three, in fact. The third party would be the home grounds, because it all starts from the home ground. You send a child into the world with some values which are bound to undergo a change when they go into schools or meet friends or go out on the job front. But basic values have been cultivated strongly. There is no reason why this merging or blurring of boundaries will ever occur.
To which I would want you to add to further from the viewpoint of course, using AI, because we do understand the fact that AI is something which is now being rampantly used in not one, rather various sectors, be it media, be it for that matter the legal profession, or even the healthcare industry, so to speak. So how do you feel can AI be used so as to either reduce or for that matter widen this intergenerational gap?
I think AI can play a very important role. Certainly you can make it more inclusive and make it, more representative of your society, but also have it interconnect, generations, bridge gaps in communications through, dialogue, through video chat, all of these things. And elderly people especially are very lonely. So, AI can be used, as a mechanism to, give them company also. The potential is there. But one thing that we have to be cognizant is, technology is advancing really quickly, rapidly. So whenever a new thing comes, there's another thing that's coming right behind it. And
so if the elderly population is using it, then they need to be constantly updating themselves that way too. And they need to be very cognizant of the data of the algorithms which are then fed into AI. Because you see, the biggest pitfall of using AI is that you don't know what algorithm is actually fed in.
And this is where, young people can come in and, basically help assist, their parents, their grandparents, introduce them to new technology, be patient and respectful and, have them work around it too. I think it can be a very good bonding experience and you can use it.
It all comes to how you use it. On which I'll come to you, Ms. Amna, and here we must talk about the very pivotal role of parents and their education per se too. Now, a lot of times we understand the fact parents perhaps might not be that literate enough, they might not be that educated. How do you feel as an educator yourself, will this in turn impact intergenerational dialogue?
As an educator, I feel it definitely impacts in huge quantities. We very often have programs for parents to come on board and get that learning experience. COVID was a big example for that for us as schools, as parents, as everyone really, to start communicating virtually all the time in every capacity, in learning, in teaching, in playing games, everything. So as a person, as a mother, if I may speak, I had to learn my son playing those games online. I had to learn how to play those games. He had to teach me at age 7.
And you were very okay with that?
I had to be okay. I was willing to learn. That's one element. Even, again, your degrees don't matter. That willingness to learn takes you places, in my opinion.
Of course.
So a lot of parents, they come from different backgrounds, varied backgrounds, but then that willingness to learn takes them a huge notch forward.
Right, takes them miles ahead. So you see, then this goes back to one's family background to start off with, and it would be then fair to say that intergenerational education by that yardstick is very important so as to actually combat intergenerational trauma. But coming towards you, madam, and before we conclude today's show, another issue that I would want you to deliberate upon is this growing issue of young people now being more open to leaving their old parents at old age homes rather than keeping them with themselves. So how do you see this trend, being the senior most on the panel today, and how do you feel can we move past it? Because definitely this is something which neither our religion nor our culture encourages.
See, desertion is a very strong word because no child will willingly desert his parents. It's either for economic. The only reason I think a child should be allowed to desert his parents is economic. Even that when it becomes so stark. Otherwise, I think that the children and parents should have a dialogue about this. What is more important for that child, and what is important for the parents? How will they survive without him? The child should be able to see, will they be able to survive there? And so will the parents have to see, will the child survive with that feeling of guilt?
So these are the issues on which perhaps there can be better dialogue, more open dialogue on the same. But when it comes to myths, madam, what are the most common myths that you come across which you would want to dispel using today's platform, especially when it comes to young people? Because at least from the young people's viewpoint, and I think you would agree with me on this, a lot of times we see that young people are not very open to communicating with elderly because they feel that the generation gap is such that they might be very easily misunderstood, or because they feel that the elderly population, they aren't very open to change.
You see, I agree with you that the young generation are a bit inhibited, I think, in taking up these issues directly with the parents. But the wisdom, there's such a thing as which is called as wisdom of age. And with the wisdom of age, the senior generation should be able to make the younger ones speak out on the issues. Why not? Take a first step. Why wait for them to, go sort of dilly-dally about it? It's the older generation who should take the first step and invite dialogue, encourage dialogue.
And then also respect differences.
And respect the difference.
Right. Anna, I'll come to you and I would want you to comment on what madam has just said. So when we do talk about the most common misconceptions that, young people like yourself come across, that too from the elderly population, what would those be?
I think, the biggest is that we're lazy, we're disinterested, we're not motivated, we spend too much time online. I think partly those might be certainly true, but that's not always the case. I think young people are highly motivated. We want to make this country the best we can. And, as we said, 64% of the population is under the age of 30. So these are, motivated young people who want to do something with their lives, and they're looking for the best opportunities.
And who definitely want to do something for the country too. Right, on your point is noted, on which I'll come to you, Amnan, before we conclude today's show. So how do you overall see young people advocating for social causes in Pakistan? And this is something that we do see happening in other parts of the world. For example, the case of Greta Thunberg, where we have seen a teenager in a first has actually been very vocal about climate activism and climate advocacy. So how do you feel can we take this a bit further, and by that yardstick also involve the elderly population, the middle-aged population, people like yourself? All this advocacy, all this activism is something which is equally beneficial for all.
Fatma, I totally see this trend as the new thing all over the place in every aspect of the social communities. It is such a beautiful thing to gather under one umbrella for one single cause. You get to interact with people from different generations with the same ideologies and then stand up for those causes. How the middle-aged age bracket
they can possibly contribute to it too.
They should. They definitely should, because only then will they be a part of the community. Otherwise, just that younger lot following through the advocacy processes wouldn't really mean anything for the higher-ups who are sitting in influential positions.
In decision-making positions.
That's why I think middle-aged, all age groups for that matter,
they need to be equally
standing together with the cause that they align with. The elderly in this community can also benefit socially. They get to communicate, they get to exercise physically and mentally, they get to work together for a cause. That loneliness that elderly talk about, we're left out, we don't have anything to do, these little social activists and activist activities would actually benefit them mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Right, your point is noted. On which note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, madam, for joining us today. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Ms. Amna, for your time today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about intergenerational gap and, of course, the impact that it does in turn have on the Pakistani society at large. If we are serious as a society in doing away, rather in bridging this gap, then things that we equally need to focus upon is definitely our education system. Something that we do need to equally prioritize is media literacy, and last but not the least, something that we do need to invest in is more constructive and perhaps more intelligent use of technology too. This is something which might be very hard to gain, but at the end of the day, the rewards are such which are definitely immeasurable. Thank you for watching The Society. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.